but no matter who I see, it'll work. Oh,
Hey, I take offense to that. You sit next to me.
Whoa, hang on.
and I know you've been trying.
Hang on.
Oh, my mouse isn't here.
So
You got
I'm
about
glad
a
I'm
minute.
sitting next to Mr. Tech here because he can get my
Aaron,
keyboard to work.
if you need,
Which is
just let me know when we're ready.
We are ready to go.
Okay.
So is that going to use the owl screen?
Yeah, I mean, it's technically using it, it's right now, it's using it. Yeah,
Okay.
so it'll zoom in on whoever's speaking.
It just-
Was just testing it, really.
Yeah. Oh, I see, yeah.
Worked out good.
There you go. Yeah, good.
So don't.
Have you, are you guys familiar, everybody else familiar with the OWL format? So this little guy here is the camera and the microphone. And as I am talking up there, Carol, you
What's
can
going
see
on?
it focuses on the
Oh,
speaker. It also includes, you know, other stuff, and the top is basically a panorama.
All by myself.
It's incredible. But just know that sometimes when you're the speaker, you can see I'm speaking and I'm there. Ralph was speaking and he gets his own box as well. So just so you
And I think it has trouble differentiating if two people are talking at the same time.
It does.
So we have to be careful.
all right. Well,
It's 6:30.
it's 6:30 in Reedfield, Maine. Please stand and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, well, welcome to the March 28th Select Board meeting. That is scheduled from 6:30 PM to 7:30 PM. We have a very light agenda, but therein lies very weighty subject matter. So we will begin this evening with communications. We have 5 minutes allotted for Select Board communications. If any members of the Select Board would like to address the public.
Eric, do you remember what we said in the office the other day I should talk about now?
Oh, boy.
Because I forgot.
Okay.
So if you think about that,
Well, if it doesn't come back, then it couldn't be that important.
Well, it's up to you guys. Anything
one
else?
thing I wanted to mention is when I was in working in the office last week doing some stuff about broadband, Ben, our sexton, talked to me about a project that the cemetery committee is working on, and I said that I would mention it at the select board meeting. So I think this was it.
That was
They're looking at doing a project with wreaths across America for National Wreath Laying Day. It's not Veterans Day, it's maybe like the 17th of December. And we would be classified as a location, which means that they would bring all the wreaths to a location, which for us would be the transfer station. And then there would be designated people from town who would sign up to be the people who distribute those. And I think he said there's a little over 300 wreaths, graves of veterans in the town cemeteries.
How many?
It's 300 plus. And the way that those get paid for, there's no money that comes to us from Wreaths Across America. You solicit donations and it can be done by volunteer groups. Everything isn't worked out, but he was just giving us this as a heads up. So maybe you would have a school group or a scouting group or some other civic group who wanted to fundraise for this. People can buy them. I think he said the cost was $15 if you buy one wreath, or you can get 3 or 30. So they would be $10 a piece. And so like the sponsoring group doesn't make anything, but they're the ones who do it for the sake of doing it. So you're looking at something between $3,000 and $4,000 that people would be donating to have wreaths come. And they would be part of that official campaign that goes on across the country. So he's just working on that and he'll get more information together. I told him I thought the select board would be fine with that, but I would tell you guys and give him some feedback.
To follow up, Mr. Chairman, depending on the success of fundraising, perhaps we could offset the shortfall, given that we have a fixed price, because we know the number. And I would suggest that we should step up and fund any outstanding balance.
I like that idea, but that'll be for the next board to decide. So Thought that was interesting.
Yes, it will.
And my other thing was, so more information will be coming about that. That's just a heads up kind of thing. And Sean, you're up for the next quarter. We're doing warrants. And I just wanted to let you know, as I let Carol know, that I'm in town all the time. So if you would like me to do the Friday, Thursday, Friday single signature warrants, I'm
As
probably
am
doing
I.
that. So is he. So
Great,
a quick text or an email.
I shall take you up on that.
If you want me, it's a phone call because this thing doesn't work. But I would be
I'm sure
happy
it's
to
that
do it.
effective, yeah.
But anyway, so there you go.
I would like to address, if that's okay, if no one else has anything, I have 2 items that I would like to talk about. Number one, when I first started on the select board, John Parent was someone who was very kind to me and took very good care of me. He helped me learn about the warrants. He helped me learn about the budget process. He helped me remember that when we make decisions, it's people's money and their hometown that is involved, and that meant a lot to me. When he passed away, we promised that we would continue the Reed Field cleanup, which I think is a tremendous idea. But I wanted to get a head start on it this year because in the month of May, we will be making an effort to basically clean up our roads, roadsides, public areas. And it's all in the name of John Parent and this sort of project that he started. When he started, it was one weekend, but we found during COVID that it was helpful to have it be throughout the month. People can take special, their trash that they pick up to the transfer station. Any of that stuff has already been worked out. We have equipment, all kinds of materials that Eric provides via the transfer station. So I just want to let people know that we will have signups for your road, for roads that maybe you don't live on, things like that. But we look forward, or I look forward to helping, sort of get this effort going again in the month of May, basically cleaning up Reed Field. And I think that's great.
Dennis, will you be using Sign Up Genius again for that? Or I think it was a website. that made
Yes.
it.
Eric does that.
It was Simon Genius, yes.
Yeah.
And
that
that's
was-
really,
That was really great. And
Oh, yeah.
I would encourage us to use that again, because I wasn't on the board at the time, and it was how I learned about it.
and you can see when someone's done, or
Yeah.
when someone has said, I'm taking a road, so then you didn't have to call in and find out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that, and maybe we could start it like mid-April to mid-May. It seems like that first weekend when we were doing it in May, the first several years, was always the buggiest weekend, because it finally got really warm.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are out walking around earlier and probably doing it, so.
Maybe just the spring clean. In my hometown, we used to have a thing called broomin' and bloomin', which I think is a fantastic, I love it, I love everything about it. But that idea, and nothing wrong with that, to adjust it, make it springtime, but I really like it. I think it pays a nice homage to a guy who Reed Field did a lot for Reed Field. So that's my number one thing. My number two thing is that I want to sort of address folks right here to the OWL and the board and folks who are here and listening. Over the next couple of months, there are going to be plenty of things that you hear as we enter into the election and budget cycle. And always, there are things that you will hear, see, and take a look at that I want to make sure people understand that we are available. This board prides ourselves on being available to the town in case there are any questions, anything that you want to know. And the one website that I think is the only website for information about Reed Field is reedfieldmaine.org. And it's the best place to go for information, facts, histories, archives of all kinds. It is a fantastic resource. And on that website is the email and phone number of every member of this board. And if you have any questions over anything that you see or hear about the budget, about candidates night, anything like that, please contact us. Because I know that I take great pride in hearing from the people of Reed Field, and I always like to be able to somehow lead them to information and education. So bear with us over the next couple of months. I think people have worked real hard on the budget, and we have plenty of robust candidates. So thank you very much. All right, excellent. We now have we have a lot. Unless there's anything else, we'll move to public communication. Members of the public may address the select board. We have 5 minutes allotted for this. I don't think we have anyone on Zoom, but do we have anyone?
We're not on Zoom, right? Or are we?
Yeah, we
Well,
are.
we are on Zoom, so
Oh,
folks,
okay.
we're doing Zoom right now.
Yeah. You got it. I believe the best thing, if we're doing public comment, would be at that table, because the owl will pick you up. You got it. It makes sense only in technology terms.
Yeah. Good. Do I speak into what, oh, it's the.
Yeah, just say your name and yeah, absolutely say and
Hi,
I'll have
everybody.
time on it. Yeah.
My name is Bob, and my last name is Guitar. You might recognize me, I own, or still do, the Emporium. And I'm planning to open it again, maybe this summer, if things go well and the litigation that the town has begun against me stops. I was disappointed to see that they've already budgeted another $50,000 after probably almost 100,000 against for the coming year. That's pretty discouraging, and it shows an intent to continue litigation against me. And I begin and will be submitting a new application to open the barn. And that, I think, is a very important thing, because it's something that was built for you, the people of Wreath. And it was done legitimately. It was done by all, within all orders and within the land use ordinance. It had a permit to open. It had the ability to open a community center, and it always did from the day it was born. Maybe began in 2013. Yes, we began that, and it was legal to have a community center. Anyway, it opens, I hope, this year, and we're submitting a new application that essentially fulfills certain requirements of the planning board, and that is that we buy the rights to put in a sidewalk. We did that. We will have already hired someone to do the sidewalk, and that's under, I hope, approval very soon. There are other things that we've already surveyed the land again, so that it conforms with the requirements of the town, and it does not. The town map, which had existed for many years, is inaccurate, and the new surveyor has provided all of the survey has provided coordinates that make it fulfill the requirements that it not be in the zone. And also the DEP had its own survey in 2017, which was an exhaustive one when we donated our land as part of the town. And it is part of the town park. And all of that is accessible and has been approved by the DEP as not in violation of any DEP regulations or resource protection zone requirements. Other than that, I have one other request, and that is that during one of the conversations, I looked at so many of them, Ralph Eno spoke about someone else, who spoke about a grant requested by the age-friendly committee to repair the post office step, which is fine, it's a small thing. But when that select board member began to ask questions about it, they said, well, no, that's the only thing we're doing with that grant. That's it, with that warrant, that money. And he said, well, wait a second, it's a bit more than that. I said, are you sure? And the answer was, well, no, I think there is a little bit more. We're talking about the safety in the central corner area. Yes, safety. And what does that safety require? It requires that the town office eliminate all the parking for the Emporium, because it's a matter of safety. Is it a matter of safety or continuation of harassment that would be terrible. And it's a way to discourage business to harass them in that way. So those are the two issues there that affect me. I wanted to speak about one other, I don't know if it's time.
You have 30 seconds.
That's good. Ryan, spoke about the broadband, and he was cautious, and I appreciated that. I worked as 20 years as director of computing at City University in New York. It's one of the bigger universities in the country. And I know the complexity he spoke about, and it involves costs that are not on computer equipment and telecommunication equipment is renewed and actually becomes obsolete after about 4 years, maybe even less sometimes. And all of these costs and the skills required to operate them are also skills that require new education along the way. He spoke about the complexity. I'm thinking about the cost and complexity. And I think we should think about that as well as any other costs. $500,000 baseball field. I think we can think about alternatives and ways in which we can use the two existing fields
Thank you.
and a sidewalk. One more. A sidewalk for the Union Meeting House, which was negotiated
Thank you.
privately, and I thought that was, it's another 200,000.
Fine. Thank you, Robert. You're all set. We
Thank
appreciate
you very
it.
much, everybody.
Unless there are any other members of the public, we will move on. We move to item 22062, discuss the Fairgrounds Community Park and conservation project status and next steps. We have 5 minutes for this item, and we also have Hannah Flannery here who can speak to that. Go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
About, so the post office project, does that include in front of the Emporium also?
No, but there were several misstatements and inaccurate statements that were just made. So it would take about an hour to correct all the errors and falsehoods that were presented. But it's clear that
For that piece?
project does not affect in front of the Emporium. In front of the Emporium is a separate issue with parking stalls that are regularly used for private residential parking as opposed to for the business use they were intended for. And that's the issue we intend to address.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Anything else? All right. Discuss the Fairgrounds Community Park and Conservation Project status and next steps. I don't know, Hannah, if you would like to take the card table of address there. Yeah. The card
Very
table.
graceful.
It looks like it's straight from the 50s, so it looks like it's good.
I like
But
that.
Eric, I don't know if you have any prelude to this or if you want to just have Hannah rattle on.
Just that the 2 items that were included in the the packet for the select board were intended to show the status of the work being done. And I want to thank Hannah for continuing to show some leadership in moving the process forward and helping to engage different groups, the various committees that have been involved with this. And we're on our way. So I'll just hand it over to him.
All right, Hannah, the owl will pick you up.
Just an update. Last week, I attended the capital projects budget and I think that's what it's called, budget meeting, and presented the project there, which was helpful. This week, so last week we sent letters out to the people whose land abuts the project, and so this week on Thursday night there's a meeting with all of those folks, as well as a representative from Trails Conservation and the Historical Historical Society, hopefully. All right, I scrambled a bunch of notes and now they're like not in order at all.
That's all right.
There's been some, since the last select board meeting, there's been some general assessment, not anything paid for or any of that sort, but I think between Eric and a few members of conservation, they just kind of stop to like walk the property to see where the water is with spring thaw and that along where the basketball court's supposed to be. So we'll know if we need to adjust how that is laid out in the final plan. The plan is out there for Trails and Conservation as well as REC to give feedback and approval. Well, approval to keep moving forward with the plan, not approval for the plan to be what it is. There's still some work going on there.
Mhm.
And I think a big part of all of this is still gonna be a lot of education for people to understand
Mm,
what's involved. I've heard
It certainly
a few
seems that way.
different avenues of people's objections, and so it's a lot of education to make sure that they're informed about.
To that end, Hannah, would it be fair right now to sort of just review that the fact that what the proposed plan in essence is doing is adding a softball field in addition to the baseball field. So the addition is a softball field and an outdoor basketball court. All of those spaces can be multi-purpose for soccer as well as for softball and baseball and pickleball. There are things on the courts as well. And that's what that project is. There has been work put into conservation and that conversation, that has been a meticulous process. And it seems like this plan is sort of coming together pretty well. So I just think it's at every point we can remind people exactly what's happening, because I think that's important.
I think a big part of the design too is what we have gone through a few different phases to be able to get on the design is that all the outfields align with each other. So
Yeah.
it provides a great space for soccer fields in the fall, multi-use space. The walkway is going to come down to those fields and provide a place for outdoor events or any sort of gatherings during Heritage Days or any other town events like that.
Right. Ralph and then Catherine.
Thanks so much for what you're doing.
Thank
Sure, it keeps you open.
you. I try not to look.
Good for you. You must have an iron constitution. Obviously, you've been hearing from different folks because you're probably out in the community much more than us. And you're hearing feedback that maybe a lot of us might not be privy to. And I'm wondering what you have heard in the way of concerns with the way the project is being presented, so that we have an accurate reflection as we proceed as to what impediments in the proposal we may be running into.
Well, I think one big one that most people have heard is that the wetland impact of the new plan and how that's going to be mitigated. That's one issue. I think there's still some concern that we're not renovating a field in a different location as opposed to building a park in one location.
That still exists. That's still a thing. Okay.
And I don't
And
think
then
it's going to
also-
go away, Mr. Chairman. It's just there
Yeah.
and it will be there.
Well, it's contrary to rational thought. So that's why I just can't believe people were getting
It's very
started.
good in me.
And then, so I reached out to someone in particular the other day just to kind of see where somebody was who maybe didn't know anything about the project. And by the end of the conversation, one of their comments was, well, I'm just discouraged that conservation land isn't just safe for conservation land. So I was then educating that person about the maintenance plan that that we've all started at in the process of this project.
Right.
And moving from there, but that it does allow for development of different parts. on that.
So really, in terms of concerns that might not lend themselves to this development project, there are no new issues.
No, I think it's just an education.
Thanks.
It actually is.
Thank you. I think that's a good way of looking at it. Carol, go for it.
Um,
Oh, sorry, Carol, I have to retract. I have to retract. Go for it.
Are
Catherine.
you gonna get an elbow?
Please, I tried to retract. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Carol. No, it's all right.
Currently, there is one field at the fairgrounds, is that correct? Correct. The basement. So not two, as Mr. Bitar stated?
No.
Okay. And the current cost labeled in the warrant is for 500,000, but I believe you've had an estimate come through that is less than that. How much is that for?
I don't know if it's a firm estimate, but it's definitely like 400,000 or less.
Okay. And are we applying for any grants or any other sources of funding for this
Yes.
project?
Yeah.
Can you give me just a little bit about that?
So we definitely have some fundraising coming in, like we did the Fish and Dirty, a small amount, but definitely helps all of it. We have another parents say they would match the $1,000 that Josh McCord got his yearly scholarship for us. And then I'm working to finish a outline grant, which will hopefully be for half of the cost.
So we're looking at something that is an up to amount, but not
to exceed.
not to exceed, and people are working hard to try and bring that amount down. And I know when we initially started this, we were looking at some in-kind donations. Do you think those will still come through?
I do.
Okay,
I've
so,
had, had a couple of people say, just let me know when you need money, and I was like, okay. I love it.
I sure will.
Give me their number.
I know, right?
You good?
I'm good.
All right, Carol,
Thank you.
please. I reinstate.
Sure. So why don't we change the amount, the amount is what I'm hearing from people. Why don't we change the amount to 400,000? Why are we adding another 100,000?
That's a very good question. The primary reason is that we had cost estimates that were originally in that range. The one hesitation I have is that we have not received a firm proposal from the engineer for the cost. And the last thing we want to do is to put forward a project and not be able to fund it. Being an up to amount, we do have the flexibility to do that. Obviously, we want to spend as little as possible on this while still meeting the goals, including having attractive functional space. So the difference on paper between $400,000 and $500,000 on a town meeting warrant, probably not that consequential for people that are voting with either they want it or they don't type of approach. And again, being an up to amount, we have some flexibility there, but I'd hate to have it be $405,000 and to not have the cost available. Part of this too is that when we budget and when we put a warrant together, we put forward the full expense. We might be offsetting that with revenue, but the expense side should always show the full expense, not what we expect to get or wish to get after grants. And so for that reason, I believe it's wise to continue with that $400,000 or $500,000 number, not knowing for certain where we're going to land, because it's flexible, and I think it's a number people have heard a few times too. So
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Can we add something of we are working on some possible grants to offset the costs, or is that not appropriate in a warrant question?
we could add that if it's not in there. I think we have it.
I don't know if I have it right
Did
here.
I-
Yeah, I think it might already be in there. But if it's not, I can certainly add it. That's a great suggestion for the warrant discussion.
I'm going to ask Ralph to go ahead if you want and address your question, Ralph.
So Eric, the reason you're set at 500,000 is because the original project estimates came in at that number. Just because the bonding authorization is at 500,000 doesn't necessarily mean, obviously, they want to spend it. So the liability to the taxpayers, if we utilize less, will not be the same as if we borrowed 500,000.
Absolutely right.
And the other thing that is the gray area in projecting revenues to design and build these projects, no, is grant money. If it's there, it's fortuitous. If it's not, then all of a sudden, then you need more of the borrowing money. However, it's my understanding that if that grant money comes through, then you reduce the level of borrowing, correct?
Absolutely.
And in that case, the debt obligation to the taxpayers will be less, correct?
Correct.
However, you can't make those assumptions when you're going into a project and you want to complete it based on assumptions that haven't materialized at that point. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
So therefore, $500,000, and that's the rationale behind it. And I think from what we have seen so far, the number is declining, but I think it would be premature to diminish the warrant number now and put the town in jeopardy down the road and have to come back to the taxpayers at some future point in time and say, oops, we need some more money. So I think this initial borrowing amount is a legitimate figure. It sounds better and better every day. And I think we should hold to that. And the fact is, and the realization is, that the obligation of the taxpayers, the more we are successful in bidding and grants, the less the obligation will be.
Yeah, Sean?
I think we discussed this at a previous meeting about, with the copy of the draft plan that was gonna be available with the warrant, that we kind of outlined where we were at in the process, and that some of the ideas we had around funding was gonna be added, right? That the rec board was doing this piece, and we were looking at this type of grant, just so we gave all the information to the voters at the same time as that. And I think it does say that in their draft warrant.
It
So I
does, it's
think-
not that explicit, but.
But that was our plan when we
Yeah.
talked about it, right, a couple weeks ago.
Right, when we have that draft document or the advisory document that goes out with the ballot or before the ballots.
Yeah.
So that people can understand some of the background to each one of the warrant articles. That's where that explanation.
To
would be.
include the plan. that we're
Because we
talking
can't put anything that's considered influential
about. Mhm.
onto the actual warrant by state law. But you can give a separate explanatory document ahead of time. You can't provide it at the same time as the ballot.
I also, does that, Carol, I'm sorry, does that help maybe understand, or do you have anything else about that? Okay. I also think that I'm going to just bring this wound up. Having just completed the project with the library and the firehouse and being caught in the weird vortex of those sprinklers, it was one of those situations where if it was an unforeseen thing, and now it's still lingering. You know what I mean? It's still dangling out there, and we just want to clip it. So I understand that. People, when I have talked to people about this, and they always talk, about the money, my first thing is it won't cost that much. It won't cost the town that much. And like I think it's pretty clear. I also think about, in the long term, I think the investment, obviously building capacity, but having, softball and baseball, having a multi-purpose, having a soccer thing, all that situation. So I hear that. And I think it's something that we all know. And I think every time we do the election, having information available is the best way to combat any questions. Anthony?
And I just wanted to add that there is an equity issue here. There is no field available for the young girls in this town. There is a baseball field, which is a different field or regulation sizes than it is for girls. I think it's very important that we put forward our best foot in trying to provide things, as we always have, to be equitable. So I think there's a lot of support for this if people just understand what the project is.
I will say that, sorry.
Oh, no, Hannah, go right
I will
ahead.
say the second reaction I often get from people when I say, yeah, there is some opposition, people go, there is from who?
Yeah.
So there's that
Yeah.
other side of
Yeah.
this.
Well, and it's all based on who you hear.
Yes.
And the great thing about the secret ballot we found out in this town is that many more people come to vote on the secret ballot than they did when we had a town meeting. We never had over 100 people, and we regularly have 700 plus at just a town meeting vote. So it's a very effective way. People don't feel intimidated when they get to vote in private, so they can vote yea or nay as they choose.
Oh, yes, ma'am, go right ahead.
Sorry.
No,
So-
please, that's why we're here.
Somebody called me yesterday late in the day and said, so where is this thing actually gonna be in the fairgrounds? Because they had heard from an abutter.
Mhm.
I said, I don't understand how that would affect an abutter. And I said, let's go out there. So we went out to the fairgrounds, we walked around. Where they're looking for the basketball court is like lots of trees in a very low area, and there was a culvert there, and it is very wet.
Mhm.
And like, if you look out from the parking lot, there's this nice bird. Raised ground, and it's about the same size. I don't know why we're going towards the road and in a lowland versus like,
There's
Where are
a
you
perfect,
talking out in the field?
there's a perfect answer for that. Go right ahead.
I'm not sure where you're talking about. to be
like,
I know exactly where the big mound of dirt was, where the tree
honest.
is on that
right
side.
if you're standing at the parking lot looking at.
Yeah, it's the
baseball field.
memorial. Yeah, it's, so if I'm looking down at the field, it's off to the right,
No, it's right in front of the parking lot,
right in front of the parking lot.
like, right, like
Okay.
parking lot, baseball field, and there's this like hump.
Well, I believe you mentioned this, and I remember thinking about the same thing, because I knew over in there in that corner, first of all, where in the corner where it is, there are no butters. It's the cemetery.
I didn't think their butters issue was.
Right. So I think that's nice. The other thing about, if I remember you correctly, and you're here, so you could talk, but I just want to make sure I remember this. If the court is ever lit, or there's an opportunity for there to be lights, right, to have the lights up, and I think then having it sort of be over there away from the other homes would be good, because then, you know, you don't have these, you know, the lights and the sound and stuff like that going. So if there's more, please Hannah chime in. Sean?
Yeah, and the other thing was the architect, and it's gonna have less of an impact on the pollinator field that's down on the right where, yeah, because the way in which the softball field goes, with very little mitigate changing that pollinator field that's right off the parking lot. So right behind that gate where the porta potty sits and stuff, that'll still
But I'm
remain.
not talking to the right of the parking lot.
No, I know, I'm just talking
Okay.
right behind it, that field down from the gate.
Yeah.
I have it.
Yeah, well, and so I can jump in a little bit and say that that was a major concern of the Conservation Commission. They were 100% opposed to the visual impact
Right.
that would have of having that basketball court. They're actually wanting to
I remember
remove
that too.
a portion of the roadway, so.
Oh, I know.
So conservation had an issue because part of the issue was the view. We know when you pull in there, having that sort of that vista be intact as much as possible.
But it seems cost-wise, trying to clear and backfill that versus shoving off some. So can I just say something?
Please.
This was a softball field and a basketball court, not an arboretum. And we need open space with mown grass where kids can run and play and ride bicycles and throw balls and have little Johnny not throw a ball and don't knock over the daylily Johnny, and Johnny goes home crying because someone yelled at him for being.
Yeah.
And if you do the trail and you go through the woods from the baseball and you come up on a high rise, there's an entire field there. And if you go down to the hill that goes down to the high school sidewalk, I have seen milkweed pods all over that place.
Yeah.
And if this is getting carried away, and I think it is, because we want a ball field and a basketball court, and it's the last agenda had pages and pages and pages of trees and shrubs, and it's like, what are we doing?
Well, I think here's,
Makes me
Carol,
crazy.
I would speak to that. I'd speak to two things. First, I think that's the type of compromise that you have when you're dealing with this many groups, with these many stakes, with all the hands in. And so I think at the
Just
level
saying.
of municipal planning, I absolutely agree. The other thing that I want to speak to, and this is why I asked the question, is because the Fairgrounds Management Plan is so explicitly clear about future development happening at that land, that the search for anything outside of that immediate area would seem to go against the very document that governs the land. So that's why I just want to say that now, March 28th, the Fairgrounds Management Plan encourages and explicitly lists any recreational type of development to happen there. And to me, that's the end of the discussion. So if I seemed a little shocked, that's why it seems so clear. Ralph, go right ahead.
Well, just to maybe put a lid on this.
Yes, I know we have to move along.
You have
It's
5
an
minutes
important
now.
discussion.
Yeah, it's $500,000.
If I understand, the original intent was to do this kind of development in that particular area. And the fact is that consolidation of recreational resources will save the taxpayers money in the long run. And that doesn't preclude the town aggressively pursuing other conservation initiatives in other parts of the town, as evidenced by the fact that we have a $50,000 appropriation to add to our open space acquisition fund. So I think to be true to the original intent, all the parties involved have bent over backwards to try to accommodate that original intent.
Yeah.
Plus what has happened in the intervening time between the time the town purchased it and now the time has come to use it.
Mhm.
And in that intervening time, obviously, there have been some uses that maybe weren't in sync with the original intent. But the town is trying to accommodate those and to signal that to the extent it can, if it can't do it all in that parcel, that there is an intent to do it elsewhere. And if I read that warrant correctly, it says other town lands. And I'm assuming that the reason that is in there is so that we can enhance and afford conservation opportunities that we might be taking away by virtue of this recreational development.
I don't have anything more constructive to add to this discussion, and unless someone else feels like they do, Catherine?
Just to Carol's point, I understand your exasperation with the scope of the project expanding, but that's the role that the select board needs to play, as well as in directing the town manager, is that there are three groups that all have a hand in the development and management in some way, shape, or form of that parcel. And this is how we've come together to have compromise. And in the name of keeping everybody's interests at the forefront, we've come up with this plan at some considerable added expense to have the landscape architect come in. And that really seemed to help with the people in conservation and in trails to buffer their fears. And there was a pretty huge rewrite of the whole design. And I think this is a really good compromise. And I'm ready to move on.
Good. Anything else? Thank you. You are free to remove yourself from the card table. All right. I believe we have mercifully come to the end of that discussion. And now we move to 22-110. Consider a draft town meeting warrant. We have 20 minutes set aside for this, which will take us to 7:30. But let's just go ahead and move through this. I want to give this enough time. Remember that this is the draft warrant. Any sort of things that you have come up with or noticed that changes, certainly we can discuss them if you feel, but otherwise we will want to just send those to Eric if it's like a typo or something like that. So Eric, if you would like to lead us through the warrant.
So this is nearly identical to the draft that you had seen previously. There have been changes made based on input from the members of the select board, also the town attorney, and some of the boards and committees that have a role in this. I will point out 3 areas that we are still getting input on in legal review and committee and board input. The first is Article 10, which is the article that addresses the fairgrounds community park and conservation project. And so that one we are looking at. Actually, sorry, that's
I'm sorry.
Article 12. Article 10 is broadband.
Thank you.
So Article 10, we are still wordsmithing with the town attorney, and also in consideration of the scope of this project is quite large, and so you want to make sure that the word choice is clear, that it's accurate, and that we're not in any way limiting ourselves or overcommitting ourselves. So this one has been taking some time. We're having it reviewed by bond counsel, as well as our regular town attorney, to make sure that that's done appropriately. There are a few small changes that I know are coming on Article 10. The first is that we would be looking at being more general about the firm and not listing somebody specifically, but listing a third party service provider. The education piece is where we can talk about who we selected as a preferred provider. If for some reason the contract negotiations fall apart, we then have the ability to pursue this with
With
a different
someone else,
company without
gotcha.
having to go back.
Yeah.
We're
that's perfect.
also looking at adjusting the very specific terms to say an approximately 2-year construction contract and an operating contract that's up to 12 years. So giving again that flexibility to continue to negotiate the contract and not tie ourselves too much. The other item that I'm pursuing right now is exactly to Carol's point about, well, why is it 500,000 instead of a different number? This one is, why is it 5 million when it ought to be different? We do have the expectation that there will be $135,770 coming in ARPA funds to help offset this. And that is something that we've already put in the budget, but we hadn't reflected in the warrant. So that borrowing amount will be somewhere around 4,850,000 or whatever that equals out to. Catherine's the math teacher, but it'll be somewhere in that range. So we are responding to the fact that we know that it's not going to be 5 million, but we've already budgeted for it not to be 5 million. So we're reflecting that accurately in
Nice.
the article.
Good change, great.
May we make a comment while we're here?
Sure.
So I would just like to correct an inaccuracy that was stated by our first speaker tonight, that we are not going to be operating this network. We had it named and now it's going to be changed to a third-party company, but the intent has never been, and we are not asking for authorization to operate this. We are hiring a company who is skilled, whose business is running a network. And in that contract, it talks about when the equipment will be updated. And that's the responsibility of that company. And it's contractually stated that it will happen.
And it's equitable,
And it's
same
equitable.
fast service everywhere in Reedfield.
So those were inaccurate statements. I just want to make sure that
No,
we keep the facts moving at each juncture we can.
please continue, Eric, if there's anything.
All right,
else.
so what I'm gonna do is just talk about the changes in the areas
Yeah.
we're still working on, and
Love
then
it.
you can back up and pick whatever you like,
Yeah, it sounds perfect.
if you choose to. So Article 12 is the fairgrounds project, and I think this one is very much nearly complete. We have a few more meetings. We've got one meeting, the abutter meeting this Thursday. And I don't think there's much that would come out of that would change the article, but we have, just for the board's benefit and public, we have 2 weeks from today, the board will be voting on the final draft. So we have, as I said to Dennis, being in the theater, that this is the dress rehearsal, the final dress rehearsal. Next time it's for real, but this is very close to what we want. But this one's one we're keeping an eye on, because between the broadband and this project, this is a huge portion of the discussion that's been had around this budget. And as I said at the budget workshop, these two items really are kind of the outcome of 2 years of the pandemic. Our community has realized how important communication is, and they realized how important outdoor education are. And aside from the cost increases the pandemic has left us with, those realizations are, very much in the forefront, and they're being presented in this budget in Articles 10 and 12.
Ralph, oh, sorry,
Go ahead.
Ralph.
Real quick, 13, the last graph, I think it's housekeeping, pay all or a portion of costs of capital improvements to the fairgrounds, other town properties. Do we want to say and or?
Appropriating funds to pay all or portion of the cost of
Yeah.
capital improvements to the fairgrounds and other town
And
properties.
or,
And
yeah, so.
It just, it
Yeah.
can't, it has to have
It's an
something else in
and,
there.
it's not.
I think that's an and, but I will look.
I remember
I
what
will look
you're
at that,
you're
yeah.
talking about. And listen, I just want to say this change is reflected, because it seems like there are some repeat items. It's right, and you took those out, right, Eric, where it seemed like it was asking for the same.
Yes,
Yeah.
there was a dual appropriation,
Gotcha.
duplicate appropriation. We definitely don't want that.
Yeah.
So that's been correct.
Right on, okay,
Yeah.
I got you, thank you. Yeah, that's what we were
Well,
talking about.
but if they, so let's say they vote in Article 12 saying, I want that, but I don't want I don't want 13, then what do you got? The vote for that project, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Then we have the need to go either back to town meeting or to change direction on the project. Those are possible outcomes, and that's, a lot of times we have project approvals and borrowing. They have separate articles. They have to have separate articles.
Right, it's a
It's a
legal
risk,
thing,
it's
right?
a
That's
legal
what I was
thing,
just
and
about to ask, yes, ma'am.
It's a risk that we run, and it's one of the reasons why education is so important. And that explanation document that we've been talking about is so important, because we can say, hey, don't vote for Article 12 if you don't vote for Article 13. It's the honest truth. And the same thing with Article 10. Do not vote for broadband unless you plan on signing up, because you're committing us to a major capital investment. We hope and we need the folks that vote to support that to commit and to do their part to support it. So I'm telling people, just, don't vote for Article 10 unless you plan on supporting the program, because we don't want false hope, and we don't want to make a bad decision.
But what Eric mentioned, I think for Carol and Sean, who are both new to this process this year, if something fails, well, right, there's a clause in here where we can spend up to 3/12.
3/12.
So we can operate for the first quarter of the next fiscal year at this year's budget rate, so that the town isn't put into a position of, oh my goodness, we can't fund the transfer station, let's say. We can't operate it. Well, we have to do that, but so that's how we do that. But anything like that that does fail, we have the opportunity to schedule and hold a special town meeting. And that special town meeting could be by secret ballot, or it could be on the floor. Those are the options available to any town.
Or to do nothing, right?
Or to do nothing.
Yeah. Which,
And so if it's a necessary funding article, then you have to do something. If it's a discretionary funding article,
exactly.
then the select board can decide what to do.
I think this is important. I have one very important question as a side note and random thing here. Are we voting at Kent's Hill again?
We're trying to sort that out.
Okay.
I've been talking with Chris Cheney, who's the dean of the headmaster up there,
Mhm.
excuse me. And I haven't gotten a confirmation yet. That's the only reason it's not being presented in the advertising notice that we put out, because we're not certain. And again, we don't want to put out information that's not accurate.
Absolutely.
And so as soon, we'll have to know within the next 2 weeks, otherwise we'll just have it here. So,
Okay.
but my preference is to have it at Kent's Hill, because it's a very good central location, offers
Easy
much
to-
more capacity and flow than this place does.
Well, they are back in session after their 3-week spring break that happened today.
Okay. Shall we continue? Anything else about the warrant?
So the last two that I wanted to note that we're still working on, and I guess are the last two, actually, excuse me, 39 and 40. One is the land use, and that one, the changes are in place as proposed. The changes that are being considered are just formatting changes, so that it's clear, because what was presented, even though there's a lot of color there, it's hard to follow. And so we want to make sure that that is much, not much, but easier to understand and follow, because those are important revisions. And the other item is the Board of Appeals ordinance that we had done a rough draft. We had initial buy-in from the Board of Appeals, but they're looking to do some more wordsmithing and to really meet their intent in some of those revisions. And so those are coming back, and those will go to the town attorney for final review. And the final versions will be in scope, similar to what is included, but the substance may change a little bit.
Gotcha. Ralph, speak, my friend.
My impression of the proposed changes are that they are housekeeping issues for the most part. And my sense is that in some of the cases where strictures are being amended, it affords the boards some more latitude to be more responsive to individual owners' concerns and the permitting process. So I think it reflects a sense of trying to ease the the requirements for the application process and be more fair to the applicants.
Yeah, I think that's right. Catherine, go ahead.
I have a question on Article 7 for Eric.
Okay.
This brings up something that Mr. Vitar mentioned at the beginning. He said that we increased the attorney's fees by $50,000, and I believe that's inaccurate. I believe the amount listed is $50,000. And that was an increase from 25,000, is that correct?
That is correct. And further clarification, the town has never sued Mr. Vitar. Mr. Vitar has sued the town and he lost. And that is where the cost for these legal issues come from. And that's an unfortunate misstatement. And we're going to make sure that we correct the record on that because the town has never sued Mr. Vitar. And that's
Excuse me, I have to
completely
answer
false.
I have to.
No, you don't.
No,
Yes, I
I'm
do,
sorry.
because that is inaccurate.
I'm sorry.
You have thrown me out of my house.
Robert, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's good. Thank you for the information. And it's reflected there again in Article 7. Are there any other articles from the select board? Go ahead, Carol.
Article 17. If I can challenge, the Guile Hall, I thought that was the windows, right?
That was say a reserve for future project needs, one of which includes the windows.
Okay.
Yes.
If we can, I just had talked to the engineer from the last window thing, and he thought if that included something with the windows, that was like a third of maybe what the cost would be these days.
Yes, so you're absolutely right. And actually, I'm not sure if you, did you talk to not Roland? Doug Riley, yes. No, and he's entirely correct. If we were to do that, he also, he's been very helpful. Thank you for reaching out to him. He's brought in the original, specifications for the windows. And so we can look at those and we have a better idea of what is needed. But two things, so that would not cover the full cost of the windows. It would just be a savings towards the potential cost. And what Doug has presented to me gives me much more confidence that what we have in place is workable, and that we might be better served by looking at air sealing and maybe some gasket replacement to make those windows less drafty, but maintaining the structure because they are very good windows, nearly top of the line at the time they were installed. So we can do a couple things. We can look at the argon, see if this argon is still in there, and we can also do the air sealing, which might be a more thoughtful way to approach that as opposed to just replacement. So
Okay, I just thought it could come up until we did more research,
It's,
but
you're absolutely
if that's
right.
just a place saver.
Ralph, you had something and then we'll move on.
No.
Thank you, sir.
Back off on
All right, good. Thank you. Go for it, Carol.
I'm sorry. I
That's what
had-
we're doing. Then we're here. Don't apologize.
Regional Enterprise Fund, what, that's set aside annually in the event a small business wants a loan?
Yes, that's
Is that right?
correct. Yep. So we don't know who's going to come forward. It's again with kind of that principle of budgeting where we budget for what we think we need. There are offsetting revenues for that so that we're not actually raising that money from taxes. It's coming from a reserve account that we have established that was from community development block grants funds. And so the money is there. It's being offset, I believe 80% by the use of the reserve and 20% by the anticipated repayment of loans that are in process. So those two components feed into that. It's a revenue or I guess a tax neutral
Okay.
effort there. Yeah.
And last thing
Oh, yeah.
was to Ralph's question, he mentioned it. What is open space? What is that concept and what is that money going for?
Yeah, so we have an open space plan that's part of our comprehensive plan. And that's an excellent resource that identifies the many different types of open space we have in town, what the goals are as far as identifying and conserving those assets. And so that's the scope, right? But we have that plan. The money is there in the event that the town would want to do any number of things. The most beneficial might be to purchase, say, development rights for a property, or to contribute some funds to Maine Farmland Trust to help do a match so that they can buy a piece of property. The least efficient but also effective approach is to just buy property outright. But what you always want to do is to try to partner, to try to leverage your money to help work with other people's money and funds grants, other agencies, and find a way to conserve that land for multiple purposes, environmental purposes, aesthetic purposes, but also potentially things like agriculture, if we wanted to try to keep a working farm working. Those are some of the things that money could be used for. Nothing is envisioned specifically at this point, but we know that we've had a lot of land transfers and lost opportunities to preserve property. One would be the top of the hill that's going to become a solar farm. That worked out probably better than it might have, because a lot of that land is being conserved in partnership with the Maine Farmland Trust. But one example that comes up often is the Carlton Pond area, and that's kind of just down the hill from that where the solar farm is going to be on 17 at Plains, the intersection there. And that's owned by the Augusta Water District. They're not really interested in working with that property much anymore, and so they could sell it, and it would be really wise for us to have the ability in the future to potentially help protect or help conserve, some of that scenic area. So that's a long answer, but I wanted to be thorough.
Excuse me, I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting for up to 30 minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you.
Continue.
Good. Excellent. Ralph, you had something? Go ahead.
Yes, and I've lost it in
Oh,
the
in the-
grand scheme of
Yes,
what's
sir.
here, but
Yeah.
I think it has to do with that $25,000 that we kick in annually to the enterprise zone. And we keep hearing that we're on the cusp of actually seeing some return from that investment.
Oh, you're talking about
Or
First
that,
Park?
or that, the development part, or
Yes.
perhaps at least a diminishment
Lost.
of the membership fee, if you will. So I see it's in there again. But,
It is in there again.
But it seems to go on forever without a heck of a lot of progress.
So quickly, we're in the forever business as a municipal government.
Yes, we are.
25 years ago, we made an investment in a business park with other
What's this weed
municipalities.
stuff?
Hey, I wasn't here then, you can't blame me, but.
Yeah,
So we did,
But we did.
and and it was put forward as a private and special legislation through the Maine legislature, which is complicated and rare and kind of sloppy, but in any event, it's there.
Unintelligent.
And it lost money for most of its existence, and now
19.
we're, Article 19, yeah. And so now we're at a break-even point with that effort. So it was revenue neutral or tax impact neutral last year. It's tax impact neutral again this year. Considering that we've just left 2 years of recession, they and I are fairly optimistic that in the next couple of years, that will start turning a profit. We've
Jim,
already, the money lost is already water under the bridge. We cannot get that money
Can't get it
back.
back.
But we can be intelligent, I think, in my view, and stick with it and start to recoup some gains after all those years of losses.
And what will, when it comes to fruition, what will that do for us in terms of recouping our many years of $25,000 a pop?
Well, we have to do the math on that one, and it's really speculative, but at some point in the future, that business park will likely pay for itself. I'd like to see it in 10 years, but it might be more than that. But after that point, we will still have our ownership stake, and we will still be collecting revenue.
So we will be getting a revenue share based on what, our level of contribution or population? How does it
Our
work?
level of contribution is a
Okay.
large part of it,
All right.
and our ongoing level of contribution. We could walk off, but then we have all those sunk costs and our
We're just
share.
walking away without.
Exactly, then our share of the pie gets smaller because.
So we're stuck
Well, we are stuck, but we're also stuck at a time,
in a good way.
in a good way, that we can continue to see progress and hopefully
Okay,
make some.
thanks.
So-
Until a couple years ago, we were stuck,
Yeah.
because we had
Stuck.
committed and we
Yeah.
could not withdraw.
Jim Dinkle took over that place. He's doing
Doing
yeoman's
good work.
work.
Where is this located? I had that circled too.
It's an
And I-
Yeah, no, it's a
It's right
great,
at the intersection of the second exit, the third exit,
the first exit.
the first
What town
exit.
The first exit in Waterville. bless
Yeah,
your
you
heart.
gotta have a drive-by.
That's it?
Yeah.
Yes, the Oakland.
So if you
exit.
got
Where
off
the
and went,
doctors are.
if you went
Yes.
off to,
Okay.
towards the hospital, that's the wrong way. If you go the other direction, there's a
Okay.
big office on
Piece of
Hardware
that.
and First Park.
Yeah, Come on.
Very developed.
It's very developed, and Jim, I'm not kidding when I say, I just like saying his name. Jim Dinkle runs that place, and he's done an enormous amount of work
Okay.
getting companies in there to like fill it up, and I mean, it's really, I mean, it's grown.
Never leave.
So I
Jim
may
Dinkle
live
is
to
doing
see a
Young's
return here at some point.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We do have a rep, we should circle back there.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
do
let's
have a rep-
focus, buddy.
Yeah, we're getting there. We do have a representative on that board of directors. I think that he may be interested. It's Steve Monslick. And he was the president of that board of directors for a few years. But I think that he may be wanting to, in the next couple of years, get done with that. So, well, he's seen it through to being what it was
He's paying a
envisioned to be.
price.
Yeah.
He's paying a price, and we all have. But I think that there's gonna be an opportunity there for someone else in town to take on that role potentially and really help move things forward.
So potentially we might see something on the revenue side from this.
Perchance,
Could even
to
this
see,
year.
perchance. to
Really, even this.
Because we're revenue neutral, so if they make
Yeah.
another $10, that would be $10 to the good.
Yay, every little bit helps.
And we'll chop it up.
I would insist on continuing to move through the warrant article if there are any questions that remain.
I just want to make a statement, and that is that I am very proud of Wreath for putting on the articles there that are by petition. I read in the paper this past weekend that there are some towns who really still have an issue with that, that they don't think towns should be giving to charitable organizations out of taxes, that people should do that themselves privately. That used to be a pretty big consideration, but the way this town handles it is that these people have to request to be on the ballot. There's an initial process, and then after they're there for, I think it's 3 years, 2 years or 3 years, then they can just submit a request letter each year to still provide funding. And it's up to the voters to decide. So if people feel that they don't want the town contributing to these charitable organizations, then you vote no.
Ralph?
Wholeheartedly concur with what Catherine said,
Good.
because we don't know who these folks are, but we have a lot of subscribers that need these services. And I guarantee from past experience that what we are contributing versus what our local populace is taking from these services doesn't match dollar for dollar. It works way in our favor.
And that explains why little amounts of $1,000 are their own line item. They
That
have
is
to be
correct.
for so many years.
Mhm.
Yes.
Thank you, that makes sense.
And they
Yeah,
more or less
yeah,
are
this is
forever
great.
independent article
Thank
to maintain that
Yeah,
control or discretion by the voters.
right.
And that was a big deal when, I don't know what it was, 10 years ago, we went to the secret ballot process, because it used to be that a person from the organization came to our on the floor town meeting and made their pitch, and people would vote yes or no. But where we can't have that discussion because of the secret ballot and not having a charter in town, this was the way we handled that.
And speaking of, I was glad to see that the secret ballot question was finally removed. I would.
We're down
any
to
other-
40.
Yeah, it's
Woo.
fantastic.
40.
Anything else, any other questions from anyone? Because I would like to get to the next items, which are just 5-minute hitters that we can probably take good care of if there are no other. Then I'm going to expeditiously move along.
In Article 9, would you just fix one of the amounts? It's indented wrong.
Yeah, I already did that. Yeah. I saw that, and I corrected it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
set. Thank you, Dennis.
So we moved to new business, 15 minutes is allotted. Item 22-111 is consider a bond anticipation note for the community broadband project. We will then move into the next item, which is still about broadband. But Eric, do you want to explain this one for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So in order to do the best we can for our voters and the residents, if they choose to pursue municipal broadband, we need to ensure that we have financing in place for soon after town meeting so that we can purchase materials to move forward with the construction of that project. These materials and the labor can add up quite quickly. And so one of the primary ways to do that is through what is known as a bond anticipation note. And it's a financial device that allows us to borrow funds short term in order to cover expenses that are in the initial phases of the project, knowing that the long-term financing is on its way. And we are working with the Maine Municipal Bond Bank to secure that long-term financing. So the bond anticipation notes, a few key things there. It is an up to amount, just like the bond proper. Right now, we have an estimate from anywhere from around $1 million to 1.5 million from the builder. Those are the costs that we might incur. We had worried there may be more initially, but that's looking a lot less likely now that we fully understand the pole make-ready costs and other expenses that really will start accruing later on. And this note is really intended to cover just the period from after town meeting vote, because if it doesn't get approved, we're not taking that money out. That's another point, but from that point until November, when the bond proceeds would come from the Maine Bond Bank. The reason we're able to do this at this point is because we had the borrowing was actually approved in November of last year by 68% of the vote. So that's a pretty convincing number. With the caveat, of course, that we come back to the final project. But back to the bond notes. So that's the time frame we're dealing with. The scope of up to 2.5 million goes to that same mindset that we started off thinking we might have more expenses. We expect they're going to be less, but we don't want to get caught short, because if we aren't able to get in queue with ordering things like fiber optic cable and equipment that have back orders and have a long time for delivery, we won't be able to deliver this service in the time frame that voters want and expect.
Yeah,
Right?
it's kind of like a bridge that.
It is a
right? It's a
bridge.
bridge, okay.
It's
And
a bridge.
the note says consider it, but what are we actually, do we need to do a motion to authorize you to carry this out? Hang on one second, Ralph.
So
Yeah,
what
okay.
I would be looking for after discussion would be just a vote, and then it's actually the, if I look back here, I believe it's the board that signs that, but let me double check.
Okay, go ahead, Ralph.
It
ask your
has an
question.
expiration date.
Well, we
so
have-
that's why we have to.
We have two proposals in front of us. One
Okay,
is
so
a taxable and one's tax exempt. Could you explain the difference and
absolutely.
what the preference would be? My sense is we would go tax exempt because it makes it more palatable to investors to pick up the bond or pick up the note as far as the bank is concerned.
Yeah, so I can get to that question. That's a very good question and a very good observation. So the vote that I'm looking for when we get to it would be to authorize me to sign on behalf of the board, because there is just that one signature line. But before I get into the piece about why there are two, are there any questions about the note, the term, the purpose, any of that stuff before I talk about the difference?
None, so forth.
Okay, so we are in the process to do something that not many Maine municipalities have done before. Several have, all over the state, in fact, but most of those towns have done so with federal dollars that have come in to cover majority, if not the entire cost of these projects, right? And so we have the opportunity as well to apply for and receive grant funding, but it's not going to cover, we know, more than maybe 10–15% of our project cost, because unlike the communities that have already moved forward with this and succeeded in getting things moved ahead, we're partially covered by spectrum. We have service, and it's recognized almost universally that it's not good service, that it's not reliable service, and it doesn't respond to the needs or the interests of the public. And those are some of the things the municipal broadband network will be doing, because it will be used publicly owned. And so when you have borrowing that involves infrastructure that's publicly owned, there are specific rules that fall into place, and different sets of rules depending on whether you are borrowing and having the town have an active management role, or whether you're borrowing and having the town not be management. And the distinction here is that we wanted to make sure, well, two things. I wanted to present two options to the board because this shows how very important it is for us to seek and receive the tax exempt status. For the period that we were looking at with this bond anticipation note, it's something like $15,000 difference. It's pretty significant. Over the life of the bond, if we are not able to receive tax exempt financing, it would be something like 500,000 or more. So if that was the case, we would have to seriously reconsider whether or not, I mean, let's just call it 10% increase in project costs due to financing costs is worth the effort. But in discussions with multiple individuals, Axiom, who's our preferred provider, with our bond counsel, with our regular legal counsel, with other municipalities, and with the Androscoggin Bank, who provided us with these options. It's clear that if we structure our loan agreement and our contract with the service provider in such a way that we own the infrastructure and pay for that infrastructure through the tax base, and they operate the network, and those are two separate endeavors, then we're good. One of the models that's analogous would be a large utility district, like a water district, or a better example might be a stadium, or like what you have in the insurance, Cross Insurance Center in Bangor and Portland, where those are publicly owned assets, but they're managed entirely by a third party, and the two shall never meet. Not exactly that way with us, because we want to have an active role, but our contract will allow for that. But the most important piece is that we need to structure our contract so that we don't run into any kind of perception or issue that might result in financing that has a non-tax exempt status. So that was a long answer, but
Right. So what's
Ralph,
the,
does that work for you? Does that answer your
Well, then
question?
we have a choice to make
Well, we
based
don't.
on how we
Right.
structure our arrangement with our provider. If we're comfortable that we won't transgress, then we could go with the tax exempt formula. But if there is any doubt, then we should probably go to the 287 arrangement, which probably, if I understand the way our negotiation is going with the bond bank, doesn't too far exceed what we would pay for the 5 million in total. It's just a question of how do we protect the town's position to make sure that we don't have someone coming after us for a tax liability because we have overreached.
Absolutely.
So Eric and I met with the owner of Axiom, and in part of those informal negotiations, Axiom has agreed to negotiate the contract so that it is separated and will be labeled as tax exempt. And Eric's been working with two sets of legal counsel at the same firm to ensure that we meet all of those parameters and that it will pass legal review with them prior to us signing any contract.
So do you need a motion to?
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess the one thing I will say is that the Androscoggin Bank and I both recommend that we go with the tax exempt certificate. And that I just wanted to point out that Androscoggin has been incredibly helpful and very willing to work with us on this. And the opinion that is coming from bond counsel that's required under in order for this ban to take effect does not have to be in place until June. And so we do have the full opportunity to do all the things in the right way to make sure that we are 100% with this borrowing, so that we are not opening ourselves up to liability, because we want to do this the right way. We don't want to take chances with anything dealing to do with this and the money that's involved.
I would entertain a motion to authorize this.
I'll make a motion to authorize the town manager to enter into a bond anticipation note for the town of Reedfield totaling up to $2.5 million for a tax exempt rate prior to April 1st of 2022, with the understanding the expense is only to be made if the broadband article passes at town meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve this anticipation note. All in favor? Okay, thank you very much. We move to item 22-112, consider marketing and design services for the community broadband project. Catherine, do you want to talk a little bit about what this is?
Sure, and I think I can do it quickly, but I'm not sure what page it's on. Does anybody know?
Yeah, it's around 46, or no, I'm sorry, that is incorrect. It is 44, page 44. Danny Campbell, D Design.
Yes, so I'll make this as brief as possible. Danny Campbell designed the WKLCBA website that we've been using for the last couple of years until the group disbanded in February. She will create a website for us using what I have created in the last couple of weeks at the rate of $75 an hour. She thinks that will be 15 hours or less. So that's a very reasonable rate, and the hosting is under $200 a year to have the domain name and have the site active. It'll be linked from the current website. And she will also do promotional materials for us if we would like, which would be 2 mailings, so like a trifold brochure or a postcard at the same rate. And she said they would each be 3 hours or less. So Eric, you have the rest of the numbers.
Yeah, so I think that we do have some additional expenses that we're going to be looking at with educating the public around this. I think it's really important that we look at it that way. This isn't necessarily a promotion in the classic sense. This is partially education. I think that this is something the voters have asked us to do, so we need to inform them and educate them. To do that, we have to spend some money doing this in a way that's intelligent, utilizing some design services, but also volunteer effort is going to be a big part of this. And so my thought is that a request for up to $3,000 would be sufficient. And so I did look at the community services broadband contract services planning line for the town accounts. And we had essentially started off with $5,000 in that account. We then allocated $50,000 additional from ARPA funds to cover these same expenses. So we had $55,000 total. The intent was that originally about 40 of that would be for the poll study, and then up to 10,000 for additional support services. It turned out that the poll study and some of the contract work around it with Brian Lippold was closer to 45. But we still have right now in that account around $4,200. So this would be, I think, a good way to just kind of round out the use of those funds to continue pursuing this project. One side note is that we have expended and will continue to expend legal dollars to make sure that we're doing this the right way. We have a separate legal fund that still has some funds left in it. And I believe that we have enough there to cover the expenses for the broadband project. So I just wanted to be clear about the total cost that we're looking at. And I wanted to say that I believe 3,000 would be enough to cover the remainder of this planning and design work.
Is that in addition to the 4,000 that's left?
That is a portion of that. So we have 4,000 left roughly, and I would say that we're drawing out 3,000, or you could just allocate the rest of it if you wanted to, but for education and outreach efforts.
So is what you need is that we're changing the allocation of what it was for?
No, it's already been approved for use for broadband work. It was a broad approval. And so I think that this fits clearly within that effort.
So you're looking for a motion to enter into this marketing design services contract?
Well, it's not necessarily a contract. It's just what I'd like. I guess I'll just say what I'd like.
Please.
I'd like a motion from the select board to expend up to $3,000 for outreach and education efforts, including design work with Danny Campbell for a rate of $75 per hour.
So moved. And does that include the mailings?
Yeah, that's all the mailings and all the
So it's the bulk rate postage, it's the printing, it's the design and so on.
all of that.
So basically, it's been moved and seconded to engage in marketing and design services behind the community broadband project. Is there any further discussion? All in, go for
I
it.
just
Yeah.
have a quick.
Hit me.
Are you using that really slick website that you showed us, like as kind of
Yes,
an example of what she'll be working?
I took that website that you, Eric, and I looked at, and I made a website for Reedfield using the town pages. And so now Danny is going to take those and make a spiffy one of ours, of ours.
It's
Thank
going
you.
full circle.
Spiffy, yeah.
Very cool.
Thank you, Carol. All in favor? Thank you very much. The last piece is to consider an engineering proposal for Nickerson Hill and Pea Ridge Road. It's in your packet under the main land use. I believe that is where we are at 46 in your packet. I would assume the same authorization is in order, basically a motion to authorize you to enter into this agreement.
Yes, and I can give you as much or as little backstory as you like, but
I think you mentioned this just over the years, the road has begun to give out, and this is a recorrection of that giving out road.
yeah, it gave out onto a gentleman's lawn outside of the right of way. So
Yeah.
there's no question. The lines are very clear. We've taken a portion of this man's property. We need to correct that and return to a proper intersection and stop. Because it does affect the speeds at which people are traveling around that corner as well, because it's banked like the Daytona 500, and that just encourages.
I have a question to ask before, and I just want to ask this as a person who lives on Pea Ridge Road. If we wanted to put up a sign that said, you know, there may be people walking, there are pedestrians on this road. Pea Ridge is 40 miles an hour, which is, I understand all the things, you gotta have a study, you gotta see all the speeding, I understand that might not change. But I think there is a severe lack of, you know, hey man, people walk their dogs up that road from Kent's Hill, it is a race zone.
Yeah, and I will say that sadly, that's the case pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, I got you.
I'm not just trying to dismiss what you're
No,
saying, but
no.
it is every road in town, every single time we've had a speed study done with DOT, every single time, they say, well, we can increase the speed limit by 5 or 10 miles an hour to reflect the speeds people are driving, or we can just let it go.
Yeah.
And so I say, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
But we can't reduce it.
But we can't reduce it, and that's an unfortunate truth that.
But
we
a
have.
signage, is that something we have to petition for? Do I need to
No,
speak to?
it's something that we could talk about, but if you put up signage on every road in town where people are speeding, it loses its effectiveness.
I would just like a thing that said, you know, like a person walking, just a pedestrian sign, because it does get a lot of, you know, just so people know, hey, man, you know.
But we do have the speed trailer we can bring back out now that
Yes.
it's above freezing, so that's one of the first things we can. do,
Either
is
way,
Put
either
that back out.
I want the sign. All right, go ahead, Catherine,
Can you just
and
give
we're
me a
almost there.
visual of where this is? This is a T
I can show you.
intersection of Plains Road and Nickerson Hill.
Oh, I'm sorry, not Plains, it's
Yeah,
I mean,
Pea Ridge,
P
yes.
Ridge
Yeah.
and Nickerson Hill.
I'm cool with it.
So you head up Nickerson Hill, you go past Saunders, you go up a very steep hill, and then you come and you get to a corner, and it's just a rolling corner. And there's a number of, a rock wall on the right-hand side and a house, and you just roll right through. And then you drive a little bit, and then you've got Lane Road on your left, and then you just keep driving straight and you're on Pea Ridge.
Okay, and so this proposal is to address that.
Yes.
And then once we get this plan, do we have money to fix it this year, or is this something that will be fixed in a future year after we budget for it?
This is something that we have money for this year for the design work. However, the construction, we had budgeted $20,000. That I think is going to be too little, not gonna be enough. So we have a couple options. We can look at utilizing the paving reserve, because we do have the ability to pull out of that through the project. The engineering cost on this is significant because of two things. We have to do not just the design, but we have to do the surveying. Adding the surveying is basically a 50% increase in the cost on this. So that's a big part of it. But the reason we have to do a survey is because we're trying to correct a right-of-way issue. So that has to be done. But we do have some funds enough to help. I think between those funds and the use of the reserve, we could probably accomplish this. One thing I will say is that if we do an RFP and we get costs for $60,000, I'd say, let's just hold up. We'll get more money to fix this, and then we'll fix it. But otherwise, I think that it's worth pursuing. And always, it's really important to have that design work in hand so you can proceed with the project in an intelligent and informed way.
Sean, and then
I'm gonna
Council.
make a motion to extend the meeting for 10 minutes because we also have a resolution to address.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Very good. Go ahead, Sean.
I was just wondering, this is more to Dennis's point, just about the speed and it sounds like recently this has come up a lot about neighborhoods with speeding and such, and maybe we could talk to our friends in Winthrop about Winthrop Plays Outside, and maybe we could look into our own initiative of Wreath Plays Outside, something along that lines.
Get some of our committees to buy in together on the concept and help place signs.
Yeah, I think I mean, it shows all over town because those,
We had somebody here 2 weeks ago.
yeah.
And I received another email today about the speeding at the top of Old Kent's Hill, or not Old Kent's Hill, but Kent's Hill, in front of the school and the church there. So it is a universal problem.
Yeah, I don't want Mount Vernon to fix Sadie Gun Road because they go fast in Wreathfield and they slow down at my house because they're about to hit Mount Vernon, and yeah, I don't want them to fix it.
But should we go ahead and make a motion to go ahead and enter into
Did
this
Ralph have
agreement?
something?
Well,
Yeah.
just, if we can't do it all in 1 year, let's at least get the design work done. And we can do it incrementally. If we have enough money to do it with funds that we have for the balance of this fiscal year, let's do that. So, because rights of way have to be determined, at least let's do that. And then the next year, you guys can consider what it will cost to actually do the physical work. But you can't make that determination until you know who owns what, where.
I'll make a motion to authorize the town manager to enter into a contract with Mainland Development Consultants per the documents in our packet up to $18,500 as stated.
It's been moved and seconded to enter into the agreement to help correct the issue at P Ridge Road and Nickerson Hill Road intersection. All in, any discussion? All in favor, sorry, yeah, little stutter step. All right, the last item is a select board resolution. Oh, go ahead, Eric.
Did you get a vote on your extended meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
You did, okay, all right, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, we're all good. We're all good on that. We have our select board resolution. Do you want me to talk a little bit about this or what this is?
Absolutely, Dennis.
Okay. So we know that it has been brought to us about the basically in helping do whatever Wreathfield and the select board can do or can condone in order to help be proactive in helping solve what is obviously a shortage of EMS services. And we talked about this last meeting with Marty, who is here. And thank you, Eric, for putting this together. And I think it looks great. And should I read it?
Before you do, I just want to point out quickly that I did discuss this both with Chief Dubinsky from Winthrop EMS and Chief Mag from the Wheatfield Fire Department.
Right.
To make sure that we had some different eyes behind it and that it met the expectations. So.
Good. And I think it is whereas it seems like a bit of a procedural step, I think it shows that Wreathfield is pointed in the right direction for these items. So I'd like to read this and then we will vote on it. Whereas the town of Wreathfield values prompt emergency medical services, and whereas the town supports regional service provision where practical and possible, whereas the town currently provides EMS to our residents and visitors through a longstanding and mutually beneficial agreement with Winthrop Ambulance Service, whereas Winthrop Ambulance Services face challenges in providing prompt EMS due to a shortage of available and qualified emergency medical technicians and other first responders, and whereas delays in EMS have in some instances resulted in a diminished level of service and undesirable outcomes, and whereas it is recognized that these challenges are both the result of the long trends in the profession and acute impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas it is further recognized that this is a statewide problem affecting nearly every Maine municipality, and whereas the Wreathfield Select Board values the essential role of the Maine Municipal Association as a governor and advocate for municipal issues. Now therefore, the Reed Field Select Board resolves to request a meeting or meetings facilitated by the Maine Municipal Association to bring together concerned parties to discuss possible solutions to this complex set of issues, and to actively participate in these meetings and necessary follow-ups, to encourage the participation of municipalities, EMS providers, and other concerned parties, and to assign a select board liaison to investigate, pursue, and report on these efforts.
Thank
Move
you,
acceptance
Dennis.
of the resolution.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept this select board resolution regarding EMS services. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you very much. I think this is a really good item to have here and clear dedication for the select.
If I could request a follow-up motion.
Yes,
To appoint a select board liaison. I think that would round things out for Marty and.
okay. Good. Is there any member of the select board that would like to volunteer to be a part of this MMA involvement? Oh, go ahead.
Perhaps,
Okay.
just that it's medically related and if it involves.
Yeah, I think it would be good, and it's also involvement with the MMA, and I think that could be good. Carol, would you like me to put you down as the liaison? Would you like to have that? I nominate Carol Dorenbos for
I
the
guess so.
Reed Field EMS liaison to the Maine Municipal Association.
Do we need to sign the backup one of these?
Yes, Eric will send us.
Yeah,
a
yeah,
copy.
yeah.
Okay,
Do we need to finalize a motion though on Carol?
I'll
Yeah.
second it.
Okay, good.
I didn't bring any bourbon, but.
It's been moved, well, I'm waiting, again. It's been moved and seconded to nominate Carol Dorenbos as the elected, the select board representative to
You got a
the
rating stick?
EMS Services Committee liaison. All in favor? Very well. Congratulations, Carol. We appreciate your service.
Wait,
Um,
you were
Would
in
we
your
be
spirit.
interested in having, townspeople that have an interest or, working knowledge of stuff like this in?
As the liaison, I leave that up to your
Okay.
creative judgment.
And Carol, I would be
Driving
happy
the
to
bus.
reach out to the town of Winthrop,
Yeah.
Fayette, Wayne, other towns in the area, and see if they'd be willing to sign a similar resolution and take similar steps. So we'll
Well,
work together on that.
We can put it, or you can send it to the state. rep-
Say it loud and be
state
proud,
senator.
Sean.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second,
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor? Very well.
we only went 7 minutes over our
Oh,
30 minutes.
night in the morning. All right, that's good. But, sometimes the shortest meetings.
But